China has really moved away from architecture being now a profession or in competency. They have fully invested in AI workflows to the point where now I'm hearing from colleagues that architecture schools are going to close. I did a new website where agents can now contact humans to do stuff for them. And that to me is terrifying because an agent can effectively affect the real world and have no real respect for the person who's doing it for them.
It wrote like me, and I'm like, wait, I didn't write this. I'm thinking, do I have dementia? Did I really write this?
How do we navigate through this future of AI? And they said local LLMs are one way of doing it. Typical researcher curiosity ended up in a big rabbit hole of local LLMs. So Zaha Hadid's old firm, they have so many buildings in their back catalogue, and it's documented so much through images and data that they could train their own AI. So they're not now dealing with the general ChatGPT LLM. They're dealing with a ZHA LLM. Circularity is kind of the next step. We're not really there yet. I mean, it's kind of anticipating the next step. The big problem we have in trying to reuse materials is keeping track of all of them. And that's a data management problem, which AI is the best solution for ever. I like to think of AI as really good when it's a problem that a human can't do.
Welcome to AI for Architects, where we explore how AI and emerging technologies are redefining architecture and the future of design practice. I'm Aya Schlochter, founder and CEO of MGS Global Group, the production partner Architecture Firms Trust, helping 500 plus firms worldwide grow and scale over the past 18 years. Every episode, we bring you conversations with AI experts, architects, and innovators sharing practical insights to help you adopt technology with clarity and build a better practice. If you found this conversation valuable, check out our other episodes covering more conversations on AI, technology, and the future of architecture. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss a new episode. It helps us bring you more insightful conversations. You can also listen to AI for Architects on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Let's begin. Today's guest is Dr. Christopher Bamborough, a postdoctoral research fellow at the University of New South Wales and the ARC Centre for Next Generation Architectural Manufacturing. He's exploring how data, digital fabrication, and intelligent systems are reshaping creativity, sustainability, and even the role of the architect. Chris, welcome to AI for Architects. It's so wonderful to have you on the show, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Great. Thank you for having me on. Excited.
Yes. But before we get started, Chris has an amazing portfolio and body of work. I dug up some interesting facts about you.
Okay.
You are building a sound system to start hosting listening parties on your spare time.
Yeah, I'm halfway through it. It's in my garage at the moment.
So what is that? Can you explain? What's that sound system?
Just a very, very big speaker.
Oh, really? You're designing it yourself? Like how big is the speaker?
It's about 600 mils by 1 meter tall. So they're quite big.
So is that something that you will rent out, or it's just for fun?
Yeah, just for fun. Just to take to different places in Sydney and hook it up and play music through it. Yeah.
What kind of music? Are you a DJ?
Yeah, I am a DJ and just a music producer, and all the other kind of outside work.
That's
stuff.
a whole different thing. Wait, you're a you're a DJ too?
Yes, I mean it's a hobby. Not I wouldn't claim it to be making money from it, but it's definitely it takes up.
What kind of genre? What genre of music do you play?
It's electronic music. It varies.
EDM?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily call it that. I'm a bit more on the techno electro side of it. Big fan of German. Anything that comes out of Germany, I'm always a big fan of.
That's great. Okay, well, I'm looking forward to maybe, I don't know how my team dug that up, but that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Good luck with it. Are you almost done?
There's a few things. I'm kind of in the process of making the enclosure, and then I've got all of the electronics to deal with. So the electronics are potentially the hardest part of it, but I'm almost done with the box.
How long did it take? Is it a
so
year
far? It's taken me
project?
6 months. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
But it's it's all digitally fabricated, and So I'll share some pictures when it's done.
Yes, absolutely. Anyway, okay, let's talk about your early career from practice to research. So when people hear the word researcher, they often imagine someone who spent their whole career in academia. But your journey really started as an architect, right? You trained as an architect in the UK and Australia before moving into design for manufacture, eventually academia. Looking back, what drew you to architecture first?
So I actually wanted to become an architect when I was very young. And I don't know, for whatever reason, I just didn't really find myself going. The UK's education systems, if you go a particular way, you leave secondary school and then you have to go to sixth form, different from high school. And it's kind of just what's available to you at the time. And there wasn't really a design course or anything like that available. It was all engineering and maths and science. So I ended up doing all of those subjects. And so I ended up doing different degree originally. It was actually traveling to Australia where I kind of realized I need to just go back and do that. And interestingly, now that I'm back in Australia, there was definitely a sense in Australia that if you want to go and do something, you just do it and just don't worry about the outcome. It's a bit more reserved in the UK. It's kind of like, you think through a lot more of the consequences and, finances. Whereas in Australia, it's just like, just do it, just get on with it. So I kind of took inspiration and went back to UK and retrained. So, kind of graduated from architecture school 29. So just short of my 30th. And then, worked in practice in London. Then my wife's Australian. So we moved back to Australia and worked for practices in Sydney for 2-3 years. And there was a real cultural moment kind of about 2011, 2012. The digital really, really hit Sydney. It hit Australia very, very hard. It hit Melbourne as well. So every architecture school was just 100% digital. So I kind of saw it as an opportunity to specialize within architecture. And that kind of then moved into digital fabrication, facade design.
Yeah.
So 2015, I worked for an amazing practice here in Sydney called Armour, there are a few projects around the city. They're very, very complex, lots of parts, or digital fabrication. But economically, they struggled, which was interesting. So I pivoted over to teaching at that point because there was a demand for coding skills and digital kind of computational design skills at University of Sydney and UTS, which is the two other universities in Sydney, as well as Western Sydney.
So I also know you studied, I just have to ask this question. You studied human geography. What does that mean?
So,
I've never heard of that. Was that after architecture? During architecture?
So that was my first degree.
Okay.
I got too many degrees. my wife
I can't
jokes.
keep up, but I need to ask about that.
Human
geography.
Yeah. So I guess there are two types of geography. There's the earth sciences. So if you said to someone, I'm doing geography, they might think of volcanoes and rocks and things like that. But the other side of geography is also population and, social patterns, political, cultural, economic. So I was much more, I guess one is treated as an arts degree. I did the arts and the other one is the science. So that's, There was always a bit of tension between the two sides.
So the human one is is that the arts or the science?
Yeah. The human is the arts. Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Okay. Yeah. All right.
More
well, I guess it really helps with architecture too. So
it has. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good.
So you began your career in architecture practice, and then you've spent years exploring one of the biggest blind spots, which is data, right? Rather than studying AI, you examined what is data's role in architecture, right? You research looks at data not just as information, but something that has to be part of architecture practice. And digital data introduces a new kind of human influence on the design process. And I was actually looking at your website, and I read 2 articles about data, and I'm like, wow, you really go in depth and, in history and the origins of the word. But could you unpack the idea on data for us?
Yeah, sure. I guess one way of thinking about it is that in modern days, I think we think of data as something which is just kind of given, that we provided it through science or through technology. But actually, historically, data is something that is captured. It's kind of taken, and it's taken for very specific reasons, often cultural reasons. So the research was trying to align a very, very big research area already, which is kind of the history and the culture of data, or data here in Australia. I still can't get my head around that word.
Yeah.
So
I'll say that
data.
Data. I like it though. I like it. Data.
Yeah, the data.
Yeah.
So just applying it to architecture and just seeing if the same was true. As you went further and further back, you realize that it is a cultural decision. It's almost a selection of evidence that fits a worldview or an argument. So nowadays we can talk about objective. We look at machine sensor data as the truth. It's really not. It's collected for a particular reason by a particular technology, and it produces particular conclusions that we then end up using to act on. Decisions get made on that data. So it's interesting that there's always a slight little bit of bias in there. You could apply that to academia. There's always an agenda. There's always a line of inquiry. So it's not that now I'm working in an environment that avoids bias. That's always there. But yeah, it's interesting in architecture practice. If you hear about data-driven design or data-driven design, we do have to be a bit careful that actually what data is it? Where did it come from? Why have you chosen it? These kind of questions. Yeah.
So that's what you did for your PhD, right?
Yeah, I started all the way back in the Renaissance, kind of 1400s, 1500s. A few architects were even then kind of experimenting with numbers and coordinates and machines.
Really? In Renaissance period? Well,
yes, Alberti was working with mapping machines. He would. It was an apparatus you'd put on your head, and you would then use the numbers written down on a piece of paper to then plot the outline of Rome. And it was like a transfer of information through data. And that's kind of, I wasn't the first one to pick up on that. There's a very famous scholar called Mario Carpo, who that's in a book of his. So I referred to that and then used it as evidence to kind of contribute to my argument. Yeah,
because I think data is really important, because right now with AI, we're relating on what's available, right? And I always say that people have to earn the right to use AI in general, because, I've been an architect for 20 years. If I load something on GPT and I see something wrong, I know and it's wrong because of my 20 years of actual experience.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but whereas I think students who are coming through and using AI, they have no idea about that. Yeah, I mean, that is definitely one of my worries. Yeah.
It's kind of like musicians, right? I was talking to a musician the other day. He's a performer. His songs are downloaded by millions. And I said, how do you feel about AI? And, it can just easily make a song in Suno, right? But, sometimes the structure is not right in terms of creating the song. But again, people need to earn the right to use AI. And then you were talking about, synthetic data, predictive design, and mapping. How do you translate that into what really works? So what is the process in if there's a young person who has only a few years of experience, and how do you teach you're in academia, right? How do you teach somebody who has very little experience analyze data, especially in mapping cities or design mapping without a lot of experience?
It's a tricky one. So we're teaching courses right now which are creating dashboards, urban dashboards. And we have previously, when we taught it, we would have to teach coding, and it would be pretty much the whole semester teaching coding. There would be some interaction with the data in the background, but generally it comes via an API from somewhere else. I think in our case, it was coming from Sydney Council data. So there isn't necessarily a critical interrogation going on before, but I guess there's a level of trust that the government has already done that due diligence. We definitely talk about it in terms of rubbish in, rubbish out in terms of data. And the biggest shift we found in the last 2 years is the need for coding. And because now LLMs are available and they can code so well, it's not just kind of avoiding it and telling them to, not use these things, is to try and work out a way to incorporate them, but also, a bit like your experience in architecture, actually learn some of the coding theory and computational design skills behind it. So you're not just handing it completely over to the LLM. That is tricky because when they're able to make shiny things really, really quickly using Claude, for instance.
Exactly.
That stuff goes in the background because they're like, wow, look at what we can do. But we're trying to, at the same time, really teach them ways to be critical and also ways to understand what's actually going on in the black box, make it less black.
So you teach the students coding in architecture school?
Yeah. So at UNSW, we have an architecture stream, but we also have a code course, and so it's computational design course, and on architects, it's kind of across the whole of built environment faculty.
Yeah.
And so we have architects, we have product designers, we have interiors, all sorts of students come in, and we kind of we choose one area that they're all able to apply these skills to. Yeah.
Wow, that's really intense. I
Yeah,
can't
it is.
imagine myself.
Wow, it's less intense. With the LLMs, it was less intense because it was really intense when we tried to get them to learn Python in 4 weeks, and it's like they're used to drawing and now they have to like learn for loops and variables and things like that. So
I did C++ in college. That was like 20 years ago. I don't know how I even passed that test.
That's that's the next level as well. C++ is so hard to get your head around.
I
so
know.
At least Python's a bit easier.
Yeah. So let's talk about like AI in design practice, right? You describe AI as something architects collaborate with rather than simply use. Like, what does collaboration between an architect and AI look like?
So I was thinking about this as well recently because we just had a conference at UNSW, and unfortunately, most of the presentations I saw don't treat AI as a collaboration. They treat it more as an offloading of tasks. So, for instance, there were lots of image generation softwares where you would feed in thousands of images that you're interested in, and then it would spit something out. And I think the thing that was missed, there's always this endpoint, kind of full stop to the process where it gives you a new image, and it's like, ta-da! Here's your new image. Well done. And they've spent so much time on this technical system that there hasn't actually been any critical engagement with whether that image is any good or not, or whether it achieves your design goal. So for me, collaboration is more that there has to be a feedback loop going on, and that feedback loop is the human, really, to apply an aesthetic, political, economic, any lens that they choose to apply to it. It needs to come from the human rather than just being this frictionless AI pathway to some kind of sloppy outcome. Really.
I know, because people really create amazing images, right? But what about the functionality of it, right? Like, what does the floor plan look like? It almost seems like people reverse engineer the facade to work with the program. Is that correct? Or they load I don't know. I'm not in academia, so what is the process of the students? Do they design the floor plan first and then they generate the facades, or is it the other way around?
I think with those projects, you can definitely criticize them because they are image based. They're very shallow.
Yes.
If I have to be super critical, the research are not done by architectural or designers. They're more interested in what the AI can do rather than what it can do for design.
Right.
So I think when it comes to being applied in design, there has to be a relationship to the floor plate. I didn't see many diagrams. Like I'm a big believer of the diagram. I've done many teaching about the
diagrams. Yeah.
Yeah. Just knowing what the spatial layout, what the relationships are, or even a concept. That's not to say there isn't research in AI that is exploring that. It's just a lot harder. And I think as soon as you start to engage with kind of spatial relationships rather than just pixel relationships, it's a lot harder, and it takes a lot longer. Therefore, it doesn't tend to be picked up as conference research.
Yeah.
It tends to
Yeah.
be. So, but it is out there.
Yeah. If you're running a growing architecture firm, you're probably not short on projects, you're short on people. Talent shortage is real. Finding and retaining skilled professionals takes time. Meanwhile, deadlines keep getting closer. And when you're balancing growth with quality, it gets harder to maintain your project standards as the work piles up. We are here to bridge the gap. We provide qualified architecture staff on demand so you can scale your delivery without compromising quality. That's what MGS Global Group does. Whether you're overwhelmed with construction documentation, need BIM support, or your internal systems just aren't built for this level of growth, our team plugs in seamlessly. Think of us as an extension of your in-house team without the long hiring process. And because we work across time zones, your projects keep moving even after your office closes for the day. If your timelines are starting to feel stretched and your team's at capacity, visit mgsglobalgroup.com. We can get started in 24 hours. We're here to help you scale smarter and deliver faster with quality, consistency, and peace of mind. So we're talking about design and architecture, and how do architects think about authorship, creativity, and when a lot of images are generated by what is that? What's the Mid-Journey, for instance? Like in terms of authorship and creativity, who owns that, right?
Yeah. So this is also something that came up. I provided a workshop at the Architectural Institute. It was their conference last year, and we, along with Nicole Gardner, who's one of the professors at UNSW, we tried to kind of highlight how LLMs are coming through, and show how authorship, or your authorship, is diluted. You can have some control over it, but ultimately there's a space of generation that you don't really have any control over. And we thought we did a good job of that. We kind of did this incremental layer where you add more prompting and the outcome becomes even more unpredictable. And it's this realization that, okay, you might be in a collaboration, but the data that the LLM is basing it off isn't really an architectural corpus. It's just a large body of images. It has no idea whether it's good or not. And we thought we did a good job. And then someone at the very end asked, so, are we not worried that this LLM's been trained on all of our images? I'm like, yes, that's really, really bad. we should really highlight that even more, because even in that authorship moment, it's kind of just taking everything. It's a bit like, we can come back to musicians as well. It's taken all of the creative work that's previously been done, image-based or photography-based, via Google Images, and that's its training corpus. There's a weird relationship going on that we are losing authorship, but at the same time, its authorship is based on the stuff that was produced by us in the first place. It's kind of a bit of a perverse relationship.
And you do is there like something like guidelines in terms of how you prompt the LLMs, like, prompt engineering, for instance, right? There's a way to do that properly so you can get the desired output. Can you talk about, design prompt engineering?
Yeah. So
with respect to architecture design and maybe site design, or, how can architects be better do better prompts, design better prompts to generate really good outcomes?
So there is a lot of information out there in terms of prompt structures. I think a lot of the time it's, you're defining the reason why you're doing it, you're defining the process that you want it to go through, you're defining the output, you're highlighting you don't want any hallucinations or lying. You need to be very, very specific about that, and then it will work around that. I'm not personally doing that, because I find the images that are generated are immediately recognizable as AI.
Yeah.
But there is really interesting work being done by quite large architectural firms. So Zaha Hadid's old firm, which is now called ZHA.
They just changed, right? Yeah.
Yeah. They have so many buildings in their back catalogue, and it's documented so much through images and data that they could train their own AI, so they're not now dealing with the general ChatGPT LLM. They're dealing with a ZHA LLM. And so they thought they can be much more specific about their requirements. They can define what the input is. They can define what the process needs to be, what the output is, give all the parameters, and then they can be very certain that it will produce something that would be, or actually they probably want to produce 50 versions that would be part of this Zaha Hadid look and feel. And then it's up to them to choose the ones that they want to explore further. Now, that to me feels more designerly, because you're opening up the solution space rather than kind of relying on something to just choose one solution.
Yeah, because Zaha Hadid has a very particular kind of design aesthetic, so they can train their own LLMs so that even now that she's gone, and like they still have you have the standards that she's created, which I think is really important, and this is where data really matters, right? So having really good data is really important, right?
Yeah.
And so you talk about efficiency to circularity, right? One of your most influential contributions is reframing AI as a collaboration, not automation. So most conversations are AI really focused on productivity, but your work also points in a different direction, and it's towards sustainability and circular design. Can you talk about circular design? Because I'm a little confused what the difference between circular design and, using sustainable materials, and how you integrate AI in this circularity.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, AI, there are issues with AI in terms of its energy use, and we all know there's a sustainable issue there.
That's what I wanted to ask also.
Yeah, so I definitely would separate the two at first, but I will come back to how AI can help circularity. So you're right in that circularity is related to sustainability. We've kind of gone in Australia, we've gone through a 15-year period where initially it was sustainability. We were kind of looking at energy metrics, light paths, things like that. That's kind of right now moved into decarbonisation. So everything is about measuring the carbon content of materials and buildings. Circularity is kind of the next step. We're not really there yet. I mean, it's kind of anticipating the next step. That's more about a future where we aren't able to rely on material extraction. So Australia has a history of mining, we have an abundance of materials, but we know with geopolitical unrest that's happened this year, it's been highlighted that these material flows that we rely on, if we want to get CLT from Sweden, no problem. Let's just ship a load of CLT over from Sweden. That's kind of how it goes. But that's not really sustainable in the sense of it not being long term, not in terms of sustainability. So really, the thing that's missing in architecture is that we're all taught to start at the beginning of design. We come up with a concept. We do pre-design. We study. We develop the design. We come up with something which is suitable for the site, which is great. But then we go and buy new materials and we cut them to measure and we use it to make the form that we came up with. And then we pretty much just wash our hands of it and we go, right, there we go, asset manager, this is now your building. And they look after it and they go, great, we'll rent it out or we'll live in it. And at the end of the life of the building, it just gets demolished. If it's a heritage item in Australia, it'll may be lucky to be preserved and maintained. But as most brutal buildings have experienced in Australia, it will just get demolished, razed to the ground. Circular is saying, well, we can't keep doing that because every building in itself is a material bank. It has all of these really valuable materials that we now can't get hold of. So we need to think about how do we disassemble them? How do we store them? How do we distribute them? How do we let architects know that they're available? And then also how do architects design a building based on what's available? So that's down to design for so form follows availability.
Form follows availability, right.
That you mentioned earlier. So that's really, how do we build something based on a limited material feedstock, rather than just, I think the thing that I find crazy is plasterboard is my big bugbear right now. We they all come in standard sizes. I was taught as a young architect to lay out my walls based on 2.4 by 1.2 grid.
Yeah, plaster, right?
That just doesn't happen anymore. It's just not a thing. And so for all of these pieces of plasterboard just get trimmed, chopped, chucked in a bin. It can be recycled. It doesn't get recycled because it's too expensive. So it's just looking at other material options. Designing for circularity means looking at other biomaterials we can use as wall linings. Timber. We in the center we've designed a wall out of mushrooms. So we've done a mycelium. Yeah, we made panels out of mushrooms.
Wow.
And we worked out a way of connecting all of these panels into a wall system. So it's there's a cultural shift coming, and it's just right now I'm trying to help anticipate and coax that.
Because I'm trying to understand it, right? Like you said, there are a lot of buildings that get demolished I mean, is that why is that? I mean, what? Yeah.
Yeah, in the city, it's for instance, there are quite a few buildings right now. They'll just be demolished because it's a smaller building being replaced by a very, very large building, and the cost of demolishing and reusing that material just doesn't make sense in terms of a development. It's these developers in Sydney are extremely, extremely good at what they do. The margins are very, very fine, and their businesses, they need to make money, so it just doesn't factor in really. So we either need to move to a point where the materials are so valuable, or there's a cultural expectation that all of these buildings are kept. Therefore, it becomes economically sensible to actually keep them. But right now, it's just easier to knock down and put in landfill.
So I've only heard about circularity design when I talked to Hank, and now to you. Is that like something that Australians are really moving towards, or is it global? Because in the US, I live in the US most of the time. I'm in my Philippine office right now, but as an architect, I work with a lot of architects as well. I mean, it's so hard to design for circularity. It takes so much time to think about, the materials and reusing them. And, in terms of longevity, how is that gonna, function in like 3 years, 4 years? Like, are there like in Australia, do you have like standard materials made out of, like the wastage, like like if this building type is going to be demolished, you create standards for this particular material to make it easier for architects to use, because liability is also a thing, right? So how does that work?
You've just described the missing part that we need in Australia. So it doesn't exist in Australia. The three best cases are the Netherlands. They have a really, really strong circular culture. The UK to a point recently, because I think their move towards Brexit and sovereignty, they've kind of realized, the island needs to be much more sustainable. So they're looking more inward for their materials. Same with the Netherlands, but the Netherlands have always had a culture of reuse. And then interestingly, I was in Taiwan for a conference in April. Taiwan has a really, really large circular mandate because obviously they are restricted by geopolitical forces. So they really, to build anything in Taiwan, they need to be using existing buildings. So there was a couple of presentations. They need to be using.
Whoa.
Well, and they need to design their buildings as future material sources for other buildings.
That's
everything,
great.
All the details are designed in a way that they can just be taken apart and, if needed, used in another building. I mean, they're much further along than we are here in Australia.
Is it like a mandate, like a government mandate, that architecture firms need to design their materials so you can reuse it when you need to?
I don't think it's a mandate. I didn't get the impression that there was a political mandate, but I think there was more of a realism. If you come to try and build something and you can't source things abroad, you just have to start looking inward.
Yeah.
And then I guess if you're thinking about your practice as a long-term thing, then it makes sense to try and make this next project available for maybe, I don't know, the future version of your practice, or for the other architects. So I didn't get, there wasn't ever mentioned there was a mandate. The government had kind of told you this. I think it's just more of the reality of building in Taiwan.
That's great. Are there any firms in Australia doing that now? Like are leading the circularity design movement?
So recently there was a building by BVN. I think it was BVN or it was Cox. They produced a building for the new Western Sydney airport, fully disassembled. It can be. So it's actually it's a small scale building. I think it's for a training center.
Yeah.
And it can be, it's fully disassemblable. Initially, it was for moving around the site. So if they'd have it somewhere, take it apart, build it somewhere else. But that's really, when you're talking about design for disassembly, which is one thing that's really coming into the fore now, that's probably the most recent version of it. Yeah. The issue is that, because I've spoken to the practices, there's a kind of an ironic quality to it that these buildings are so nice that actually they think now the building will never move because it's and they won't want to take it apart because it's so well designed that actually it'll become a permanent object and not do the thing that it was intended. But anyway,
I would love to see the building if you can send it to me and in an email. Because I really want to understand it. But now you talked about AI, right, and sustainability. Do you think AI could become one of the most important sustainability tools architects have? A lot of people are trashing AI, especially, my kids. My daughter is 19. And all of the kids in her generation, 19, 20-year-olds, they don't even want to think about AI or touch AI in that generation.
Yeah. I have a 14-year-old daughter. Same. Yeah.
And she's, right?
She doesn't want to go
and Claude and GPT and Gemini and da-da-da. They're like, Mom, why do you have to ask AI about where to go for lunch? Like you're wasting, she gets so mad at me. So can you try to explain or maybe, how to justify AI and sustainability in your own terms?
Okay. For circularity, so if I'm looking, if I got my circularity hat on, the big problem we have in trying to reuse materials is keeping track of all of them. And that's a data management problem, which AI is the best solution for ever. It can detect things, it can track things, it can find relationships, databases. It can then, through LLM predictability or prediction, can start to then provide feedback on that large amount of data. I like to think of AI as really good when it's a problem that a human can't do. So for instance, we have global scale problems that we just can't get our heads around. They don't end up being part of the kind of cultural. I think Timothy Morton calls them hyper objects because they're just too big for us to understand. They're the perfect area for AI because they can digest the enormous amounts of data and then they can start to pick things out. So yes, I think it's needed if we're going to move towards a circular design outcome. I justify my use with my daughter because she's exactly the same as your daughter.
I need help with that too.
Yeah. So I've been experimenting with local LLMs on my laptop. And
what are those?
Yeah, so if you'd asked me a week ago, I wouldn't have been able to answer this, but I've spent about a week looking at this. If you have a computer in your home, you can put a kind of a personal LLM, which is nowhere near as sophisticated as one of the really, really big ones, but you can effectively do the same things, but it's running on a local machine. So it's using energy still. It'd be interesting to know if we all had local LLMs, whether it would be the same amount of energy, but it's at least you're not extracting it from a data center. It's the data centers that are the real issue here with their water use and, urban fabric. I mean, they don't provide anything spatially or socially. They're kind of, they are literally black boxes. So when it comes to things like coding, I've been playing around with these local LLMs. And I honestly think that's the way it's going to go. if
So where do I get a local LLM? I mean,
yeah, so there are softwares that you can download, and then you can then download an LLM, local LLM, and it just runs on your hard drive. So the most recent Mac computers allow you to do that, because the chips are designed in the way that you can access both the graphics card and the both sides of the RAM, which has always been the thing that's been holding it back. So yeah, I think it will probably move towards local LLMs that are helping
that's
with
so
us.
interesting, Chris. I've never heard of this before. That's
Yeah,
great.
I only found out because I read this. I had an email from it was an active group, so not like political. What's the word? They're kind of protesting, like a political protest group.
Yeah.
And they were saying like, how do we navigate through this future of AI? And they said local LLMs are one way of doing it. So I kind of piqued my interest and thought, what are these local LLMs? And then, typical researcher curiosity ended up in a big rabbit hole of local LLMs.
So what do you think of it? Is it as good as Claude, or how do you compare it?
No. So there are different LLMs for different things. So I've been playing around with the coding one just to see whether and they're okay because they're very, very specific about what they can do. Yeah. So the thing you're downloading is, say, 30 gigabytes in memory. It can do one thing very well. I think Hank spoke about this as well in his in the last podcast. So it can do one thing really well. I've now got another one for reasoning and writing, helping to write and spell check and edit. When they can start to talk to each other, I'm a bit worried about that as the future.
Is this one company that does this, or several companies?
No, so right now, the coding LLM is from Alibaba. Actually, it's called Qwen 3.5.
Really? From China, Alibaba? Whoa.
Yeah, so it's a local.
I'm learning so much,
LLM.
Chris. I didn't expect to learn about local LLM. So it's Alibaba. Okay, that's good.
Yeah, I think Alibaba have developed the Qwen, and then Gemini 4 is Google. Google's made Gemini 4, and these are open source, so you're not paying for tokens, which is the big cost for Claude and ChatGPT. Yeah, you can run it however long you want on your local laptop. It just obviously uses up energy, and you plug your laptop in, but I think the level must be much, much lower. Again,
so Gemini has one too, because I talked to Gemini. They have a little bit of my data. So data. If I load that here in my computer, you think it will still have the same data
so
that
nothing,
I have? Or
no, you don't share. That's another amazing aspect of it. Is it's completely enclosed on your laptop, so you can specifically tell it, do not contact the cloud, do not allow my data to leave the laptop. It's a kind of a walled, and then you can use other software which makes it even more protected. There's a thing called Docker, which we won't go into that, but so
maybe I'll tell my daughter that I have a local LLM. I'm just using my power outlet.
Yeah, exactly. That's I hope I'm right in that it is reducing energy.
Yeah.
I need to do a bit more investigation to see what would happen if we all moved to local LLMs.
So now you also talk about agentic AI and the future of the practice. You're currently researching agentic AI in a term that's like appearing everywhere. People are asking, what is an agentic AI, and how do you, how can we use it in architecture practice, and when should we be cautious about it?
Yeah, I think we should be cautious about it fairly soon. No, I think so the big shift is, I gave a lecture on this last week. There was kind of three big shifts in the way that humans relate to production or productivity. Originally, mechanization kind of took our muscles and made them stronger. The next one, information technology, kind of took our brains and made them faster. Now this one is taking human goals and giving them over to an AI to then solve that goal. And it's same but different. There's a kind of a line there in terms of how information has been passed over. Ultimately, AI now is goal based, And by them interacting with each other, they can work towards an outcome. The problem I find or see in it is that, and this is coming up in lots of the research, is because the goals are usually very open and AIs are very clever now, they will explore a goal and find a solution which is not particularly, it has no care for ethics or social consequences. For instance, I was this conference I was at, they highlighted a new website where agents can now contact humans to do stuff for them. And that to me is terrifying, because now an agent can effectively affect the real world and carry out goals and have no real kind of respect for the person who's doing it for them. They're just kind of using these assets, human assets. I think it's called the meat space, which is a horrible term. Have you heard of that?
Meat, MEAT?
Yeah, the meat space.
Okay, why?
Yeah, I think it's because there's the online space and then the meat space. I kind of read it and I was like, that's pretty disgusting. So
yeah,
I think that's why we should be worried, because there is definitely, there's definitely benefits. Everyone in academia now is realizing that if you give your emails over to an agentic AI, it will pick up patterns and give you summaries, and it will speed up productivity to no end. But there's no knowing right now whether it's sent an email on your behalf, or has it contacted something else, or is it linking something out. It's a little bit murky.
I had an experience about that.
Yeah, you did. Okay, did it send an email on your behalf?
It wrote like me, and I'm like, wait, I didn't write this, because I was testing a new AI tool for email management. It sounded like me, and I'm thinking, do I have dementia? Did I really write this? Do I have memory loss?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh yeah. I removed the tool because it was in my drafts. So I'm like, okay, that's a little bit too much, but yeah,
it is. Yeah, and it's not necessarily asking your consent along the way. If it was very open and said, do you mind now if I produce a draft for you? So you'd say, okay, no, I don't really want that. It's just, it goes ahead and does it, and it's hard to know how far it's going to go. So yeah, it's a tricky one. In terms of practice, there are, the thing that we're exploring is practices have enormous amounts of information and data about how they do things.
Yeah.
And right now, the approach is a bit like how we've described it, is you'll have a tool that maybe summarizes emails or looks at calendars or summarizes transcripts. Now, if they can be contained in a way that's responsible and trackable, there's a real value to the transcript summaries connecting with the calendar, connecting with the email, connecting with Teams, And as soon as all of these things can be tracked, there's a much, much bigger data collection, and then the insights are going to be much larger. So we're kind of moving towards that. We do think it's going to change architectural work quite significantly, just through it means now a move towards other different professional roles for the architect. If for instance, I hope drawing doesn't disappear. Maybe there's a resurgence back into drawing, but if drawing does disappear and image making representation does disappear, where's the new outlet that is an enjoyable activity? I do hear that architects are going to move towards kind of project management, areas. I can't see. I love architecture because it is a creative endeavor. It's critical. As soon as you become more of just a manager of projects, that to me is not moving forwards.
Right.
That's not making it more enjoyable for me. So yeah, we're trying to find right now, we know what the current situation is, and we're trying to imagine future pathways for how things might work.
So based on what you described, it's really about operational workflows, not necessarily architecture, right? Like the agentic AI is more in operations. do you see agentic AI as like more like doing architecture work, like drafting and like documentation and construction documents?
Well, yeah, in the center, we like to think, we talk about AI and agentic AI in terms of, and I think Hank also said this, but we think of the architect, what they do. We think about the architecture business, how that's run. And then we also think about buildings as architecture. It's going to affect all three, really, because in the center, we have industry partners. They are much more interested in the business side of it. Now, the business, the effects of the business have effects on architecture and the architect. But right now, the retraining, the retraining of architects is going to be so slow because it has to come from university education. All the competencies have to change.
Yeah.
The way things are done right now, they're going to remain like that for quite a while.
Yeah.
So it's actually more, how can a business be more smart in terms of the work it goes for? When it comes to circularity, how can we use data from a previous project to inform a new project? It's these kind of new ways of doing things.
Data-driven statistics, so you can create, solutions, right, based on the data that you have.
Definitely.
From.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, every project has a pathway of things that worked, things that didn't work,
Yeah.
decisions that got
Yeah.
made. If you can
Yeah.
track all of that, then you can make sure you don't do the same thing next
Yeah.
time. It should, in theory, optimize.
Yeah.
Whereas, architects are famous for
Yeah.
doing the same thing,
Yeah.
getting to a project
So
and going, oh.
so my next question is,
Mm.
they always say architects are so, last to adapt. Like, what is the adoption rate of Australian firms and, in terms of AI?
Yeah.
Right now.
So you maybe be surprised to hear that it's very, very high right now. Every practice that we are kind of in contact with, maybe I'll caveat this with the larger firms in Sydney, kind of 50 plus, whereas the majority of practices in New South Wales that's the state. That's one of the states in Australia, are smaller practices, maybe less than 10 people.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't comment on whether they are in investigating AI, but your larger practices who are kind of doing the larger buildings, they are all in the process of coming up with AI policies and
That's
frameworks.
Great.
Yeah. There are now so many softwares out there as well that, part of their problem is also trying to choose the right solution for the problem.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's definitely in process.
Yeah.
We in that respect, we do tend to look towards the UK and the US for that.
Yeah.
I think the US might be selling itself short because I've heard of lots of circular projects that are happening and just potentially in very local pockets. Around the US. Yeah. I think also
I'm gonna try to investigate, maybe interview architects that are doing circular, design, because it's very interesting concept.
Yeah, I think in the US you've definitely got some really big big hitters in that space. So
yeah. We didn't really touch on your digital fabrication. I know that's a big part of your work. And what is that exactly? Like you're training LLM promoting in digital fabrication. Yeah.
So that was to do with the vibe coding or the kind of LLM coding. We've been looking at teaching students how to create geometry, kind of 3D geometry that isn't manually made. So it is generated through code. I'm mainly trying to avoid the 4 or 5 weeks of pain of learning Python or C++. And so we've been looking at LLMs. The problem we've hit right now is that LLMs don't have any real idea of what Rhino is or how Rhino, it tries its best, It's very, very good at knowing what Blender is, which is another software.
Yeah.
So it's just something over time, its domain knowledge will improve and it will understand. In terms of digital fabrication, obviously whatever's in the computer, it can then be translated into machine code. In the case of 3D printing, we use a lot of G code. Yeah. And we do lots of large format 3D printing. Yeah. And which has a good circular
connection as well, because we use plastics that we can then reuse in future 3D printing.
Yeah. So where do you think the future of architecture will be in 3 years and in 10 years? I'm sure you've thought about that. Or maybe in 6 months and 10 years from now, like.
I think it's going to be different per geographic area. China has really moved away from architecture being now a profession or, a competency. They have fully invested in AI workflows to the point where now I'm hearing from colleagues that architecture schools are going to close. There are no architecture courses anymore.
Yeah.
I think that's one way. I think then there might be a European approach, which is a bit more measured, a bit more controlled, potentially more material driven, spatial driven. I think Australia will inevitably move towards where the US and the UK goes, just because I think it's always been the case, just through partnerships. And I think AI will have a big effect, but I can't see architects losing the role of kind of having a creative input into the built environment. I still think hopefully they will manage to get back their responsibility and their value in society. It's kind of disappeared a little bit as the digital tools have come in. But if they can show their worth in creating healthy, vibrant environments, then it's then up to them to use these tools in a way that keeps them relevant and keeps them in service of society, which I always think architects kind of I like to think they have a responsibility for.
Yeah, and I think being in architecture is actually I love the profession because it's the only profession that deals with the built environment, right? And only humans have the five senses. You can smell, taste, touch, feel. So I think it's really important for humans to be in the game because AI cannot feel, they cannot hear, they cannot smell, they cannot experience, right? So I'm very optimistic about the future of architecture because we're the only ones who can experience real things through our five senses.
I agree. I completely agree. It made me think about one thing. I do think we're going to see built environments that are tailored in ways for humans, technology, and animals. I think animals are going to come into the built environment much more. I think there's already been moved that way. Humans, I mean, we're used to having an influence in the built environment. I think with things like drone ports and, delivery elements, there is going to be a change in the built environment for that. So there's this interesting,
That's true.
Yeah, interesting interaction between those three groups. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting future.
I know it's scary, but I'm trying to be optimistic. What are you excited about, Chris? And then in the next 3 years, projects, personal, hobbies, whatever.
Yeah. So I'm going to be trying to build more, trying to do more circular design projects. I have a research group at UNSW, and we are going to hopefully get hold of some materials from a building in the UNSW that's being refurbished. Ironically, it's being demolished, so we couldn't get them to reuse the building, unfortunately. So we're going to have hopefully lots of block work and timber, and we're going to try and do some projects around the university just to try and highlight material waste and material reuse and things like that. And then, working on a book chapter with someone right now. So that's going to be a kind of 1-2 year. Actually, no, that's going to be beginning of next year due. And then just really working towards this agentic AI future. That's going to be probably a 2-3 year project. And there are 4 or 5 of us working on that. So that's not just me.
Yeah, I would love to, keep me posted in, when you're ready. Oh, actually, I have one more question.
Yeah, sure.
I checked out your website and I'm interested about the fonts that you use.
Yeah. I can't remember now.
Your font. I was like, who? Because I read like 2 articles already. I think it's really interesting because I like, all the historical, data that all the history behind data. But I'm also curious about the font, and what font did you use?
Yeah,
Is
I
this your
can't
own
remember
font
now.
that you created?
No. I think it's
Oh,
a
okay.
I think it's a Google open font, um,
Okay.
or web font. There's a name I can't remember that because it did take a long time to actually choose that. I wanted something. Well, I wanted something that looked digital and looked code, kind of computer codey.
I know. I was
Um,
like, wait, I was like this.
yeah, could you actually read it? Because if you can't read the article because of the
No, I
font,
could
maybe
read
that's
the
backfired.
article. I could
Okay.
read it on my computer, but it was hard to read on mobile. But my eyes
Okay.
are
Yeah.
bad
Yeah.
too. I'm
No,
50, so
no, I'm only 2 years away from it, so my eyes are the same.
yeah. I just had to ask because I I also am a creative, so I study fonts, and I'm like, oh, what's the meaning of this font? But yeah, you
Yeah.
just explained it. It's yeah. So, but what I do, Chris, is I copied your article and I
Mhm.
put it in Speechify. Are you
Yeah.
familiar with Speechify?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Gwyneth Paltrow read your article for me. So
Oh wow! Oh, Gwenny,
yeah,
thanks, Gwen.
yeah. So
I
I
didn't
didn't have
realize.
to read it.
I didn't realize it had stars. Is that? Do you
Yeah, I
think
think
that's?
Mr. Beast is one, and I like Gwyneth because her voice is so soothing, right? So
Yeah.
I'm hearing technical content, but it's read by Gwyneth Paltrow. So that's what
So
I did. Coming back to coming to my office.
has she given her permission? She obviously given her voice to be trained to an AI. Is that
Yeah,
the?
and
Wow. Okay.
Speechify. There's 3 voices, but I chose her.
Yeah, I wouldn't choose Mr. Beast. I don't think that's.
Yeah.
I hear it on my kids are watching YouTube. I hear his voice too much already.
Yeah. Any parting thoughts? Anything you wanna share for the youth? Yeah, the young students or people who want to go into architecture? Anything that you want to share?
Yeah. So the thing that drew me to architecture was the making of stuff, like the real world experience of architecture, but also the way it can have a statement. It can make a statement in the world. It can be critical of things, social issues. So I just think any architect now coming through, try not to be seduced by the beautiful pictures and the glossiness of architecture, and kind of get involved in the materials, the spaces, go and visit things, and try and understand why things were built the way they were, and what social relationships that they shape and form. Because I find that sometimes gets lost in the study of architecture.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Chris, for the conversation, and
No
I look
problems,
forward
lovely.
to sharing your podcast and all your insights to the audience.
Great, thank you. It was a really good conversation.
Thanks for joining us in another episode of AI for Architects. I hope today's episode sparked your curiosity about AI's impact and opportunities in architecture. Subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss our upcoming episodes, and sign up for our newsletter for exclusive content and AI tool reviews at aiforarchitects.ai/subscribe. This podcast is brought to you by MGS Global Group, driving growth for architects everywhere.